Good evening. I know you guys are used to seeing me on Thursdays, but I have a special guest tonight, Doug Gansler. And so I said, why not come on Fridays? Because it is the summertime and we have to adjust our schedules because, we don't have to wear a mask outside. So we can go out and have fun at the beach and things like that. And I'm pretty sure Mr. Gansler was like, hey, I got some things to do. So can we do it on Friday? I said, of course we can. So I am so happy to have you here tonight. And whoever is watching, please make sure you share. And I know that you guys tune in later. I think we're going to have a great discussion. But first, I want to introduce my guest, Doug Gansler. And he is the governor candidate for Maryland. And I would love for you to introduce yourself and tell us what's been going on.
Well, yes, my name is Doug Gansler. I grew up in Maryland. Most of the listeners may remember me as the Attorney General of Maryland. So I was an assistant United States attorney for 6 years under Eric Holder, prosecuted mostly homicides, but all types of different crimes. Got involved in the criminal justice system, criminal justice reform back then. Then I was the state's attorney in Montgomery County, a lot of different kinds of cases, the Beltway snipers being the one that a lot of people recall. Mm-hmm. And then I was attorney general for our state of Maryland and president of all the attorneys general for 2012, 2013 for the country, and been in the private sector, ran for governor, lost, been in the private sector for 6 years. COVID hit, and like everybody listening, it hit us different, and we all got a little introspective and retrospective, and I realized, hey, I like helping people, and while the private sector is great and pays better than the government, I want to help people. So I decided to get back in, got a lot of encouragement to get back in. There were some candidates that aren't as favored by Democrats, so they said, we need you to get in there, and we need you to get in there because you can win. And we've lost 3 of our last 5 elections to the Republicans, so they're like, we need somebody who can actually win the general election so we can get all these ideas that we're going to talk about in the next little while implemented. And so here I am. It's been great. As you know, the primary is literally a few days under a year away. Mm-hmm. And so it's going to be a long year. So
yeah, it is going to be a long year. And so I'm happy to have you here tonight. And I definitely want to ask some questions of you. And so our viewers can get to know about you because I just knew that it was important for Frederick to know who you were. And also my podcast goes a little further than Frederick so other people can see also. So let's talk about voting is going to look a lot different in the next 2 years. And so a big topic has been voter suppression, especially in the Black community. Let's discuss about voter suppression and how do you feel about that? How do you feel about the mail-in ballots first?
Well, it's terrible. First of all, it's not completely ironic and coincidental that we're talking as the July 4th weekend is upon us, and there's nothing. And it's really exciting for me to kick off the July 4th weekend with you on this discussion, but it goes right to the heart of the question, which is voting. I mean, there's nothing more important than voting. And we remember there used to be poll taxes and literacy taxes and just ways to suppress the vote. And my view has always been, why not flip the coin to the other side and instead of trying to suppress the vote, have the best message. And hope that everybody votes. Because if you got the best message, you want everybody to hear it. You want everyone to vote for it. And so we have a history and a legacy of voter suppression in the United States, less so in Maryland, but it exists for sure in terms of where they put the polling places and when they allow early voting. One of the things I want to do when I'm governor is actually to have election day, before I get to the mail-in, election day itself, both the Tuesday that we have it, but the Saturday right before. So you have it Saturday and Tuesday because too many people don't vote because they're at work, they have childcare issues, they have a lot, their weekdays look different than the weekends. And so you can choose. And not just as sort of this early voting concept where some counties, they have literally one voting place, but every place where you can vote on Tuesday would be open on Saturday, including the school locations because there's no school on Saturdays. And so you increase voter turnout that way, but also through the mail. and we ought to. And Governor Hogan's actually done a good job. He had really no choice because of COVID in expanding the ability to vote by mail. We're going to be able to vote by mail in 2022, but we ought to do it where every registered voter gets a ballot, and then they can send the ballot in. And it's great for so many ways. First of all, the mailbox, we color our mailboxes different colors, but it's not black, white, brown. It's every color, and the mail doesn't know who's getting it. So everybody would get it, regardless of their socioeconomic status or their race or what have you. And then they can choose to send it back in, and it makes it a lot easier to do so. But you can also look at who your delegate is. A lot of people sort of focus on the president race in the presidential year, the senator or the governor, and then they get in there and they're like voting for the clerk of the court or even their delegates on, oh, wait, I like that name, or, whatever. And it's the wrong reasons, especially for judges, which we're going to get rid of judicial elections when I'm governor, but right now we have them. But you have an opportunity, if you get your ballot in the mail, to actually do some research on those folks and make your vote more informed. And so I'm all about mail-in ballot. The more people we get to the polls, the better. And we ought to just have mail-in ballots going forward forever. And there's no such thing as this voter fraud issue. That doesn't happen with the mail-in ballots. There's protections there. Other states have done it. Oregon actually has vote by on the internet. I don't know that we're there yet, but certainly we can get to mail-in ballots.
So you had mentioned about getting rid of judicial elections. Why do you want to get rid of that? Could you tell us, so some viewers do not know the significance of that, and why, and what's your reason for that?
Well, it's incredibly important. So I've been pushing for this for years. In fact, when I was Attorney General, I brought Sandra Day O'Connor down. This was her big issue once she left the Supreme Court, to get rid of judicial elections. And there's so many different reasons. The sort of biggest principle is these judges are deciding people's liberty, who to put in jail, and making sure we don't put innocent people in jail, and that we hold accountable the people who are violent offenders. And so it ought not to be the person who's able to raise the most money or knock on the most doors. They're not politicians. They should be the exact opposite of politicians. They should not let politics and the winds of the day affect their decision-making process. So we want to depoliticize it. We want to take the money out of it, because nobody knows the name of their judges except the defense lawyers and plaintiffs' lawyers. And you want to have a fair playing field. You don't want to be the person who goes into court and looks at the other table and say, hey, that lawyer gave that judge, $5,000 in the last election. What kind of shot do I have? But the biggest reason where I come at it from is a diversity issue. So in Maryland, every time there's been a person of color in a contested race in Western Maryland, Southern Maryland, or on the Eastern Shore, they have lost. And I mean, never do you put your opponent's picture on your literature in politics, as you'll find out, except for if you're the judge and it's like, oh, I'm the white guy, this is the African American I'm running against, vote for me. And it's just horrible. And back in the 80s when we started this, it made sense because governors weren't putting people of color on the bench, but now they are, and that's why elections matter, and that's why we need a Democrat to win, to keep the bench more diverse. And so I want to get rid of judicial election. I think there's nothing good about it and a lot of bad things about it.
Thank you for that. So that'll go right into our next question. So Governor Hogan vetoed the Juvenile Bill and about juveniles having to not being sentenced as, without parole, life sentence. And as you know, you were a state's attorney general, and you were homicide and violent crimes. And as I work in Baltimore, we all know Baltimore is a city with lots of violence. And most of the people there that have committed crimes, or a good amount of the people that committed crimes, started at a young age, 16, 17, and it just builds up, right? The doc just builds up. How do you feel about that bill, and what do you plan to do with that bill? Because that's really important when it comes to our justice system.
So I'm the only person running in the race on either side that has a background in criminal law and justice. And I started the criminal justice reform and police reform back when I was the president of the NAACP in Montgomery County Criminal Justice Committee in 1989. So I've been working on police reform issues. When I was state's attorney, for example, every time a police officer shot his or her gun, I put that case in front of the grand jury. I didn't whitewash it. I didn't make my decision. I let folks in the community make those decisions. We put in community prosecution to work to help build trust between prosecutors, police officers, and the community they serve, and massively increased diversity in the government offices that I've run. Not just because it's the right thing to do, not just because I'm a Democrat, but because you're more effective. And the office runs better and it's more effective, particularly working with the community. So that's an important piece of it. As we look at what happens to juveniles, we all did dumb things when we were kids. And not that people shouldn't be held accountable, they should. But there's almost no crime for which is that somebody could commit that as a juvenile for which they should, and I mean 16, 17, 15, 14, where they ought to still be in jail when they're 80. It doesn't make any sense. And so I don't think there should be life without possibility parole for juveniles. I think there should be life for the most egregious. As you know, I prosecuted the Beltway snipers, and one of the snipers, one of them has actually been executed, Muhammad, and the other is in jail. Whether or not he should get out someday should be up to the parole board and sort of an individual assessment as to the crime that he committed and the person he is, the criminal he is. But he could stay in jail up to life. That's what life means. People don't understand that. That means if you get sentenced to life in prison, that means the maximum time you could spend is life, but you're parole eligible before that. And all that. But life without parole means you're not. That means you're going to die in a cage. And there's some people that commit crimes as adults that actually have sort of brought that upon themselves. Not many, but most. Most that get life without parole. But we ought to be reviewing all folks' sentences when they get to be seniors. So if you're 60 years old, for example, and you spend at least 15 years in jail, you ought to be parole eligible. And because you're not likely to be an offender and you can contribute to society. Instead of us paying $30,000 a year to keep you in a cage for your third or fourth decade, we ought to take a review and see if you actually are a danger to the community. So we ought to look at it for older folks, but certainly for juveniles that offend. And just on Baltimore, what's going on in Baltimore is unbelievable. I mean, and you're there, you see it. Just imagine what Baltimore will be like if we have a Republican governor for another 4 years, or just reflecting what's going on there, and having a governor that has not been involved in police reform and criminal justice reform in the criminal justice system. I mean, almost everybody that I'm running against wouldn't know the difference between, an indictment, a grand jury subpoena, or whatever it is, forfeiture, asset forfeiture, RICO. They just don't know. They've never been in the system, and then so you can't expect them to be able to reform it. And there's so much that we do need in our criminal justice system.
Yes, I agree with that. Now, I would like to ask you a question. You talk about economics on your platform. We all know that economics also deals with buying a home, because we know when you buy a home in Maryland, that goes back into the communities and things like that. But it also is very difficult to purchase homes in Maryland now, right? Like when I think about Frederick itself, we are growing tremendously, and our homes are becoming very expensive, and we are paying city and state taxes, city and county taxes. That also is included in buying a home. How would you improve that in making opportunity for people to have the opportunity to buy homes? Because when you look at the homes now, they're like 400,000, 500,000. But of course, the workforce does not support that, right? So what will you do as a governor to maybe help with taxes, maybe how in that form of fashion when it comes to home ownership?
Yeah, and home ownership was something I've obviously spent a lot of time on in my career. So when I was president of all 50 attorneys general in the United States, we had something called the National Mortgage Foreclosure Crisis, where we were able to get $32 billion almost $2 billion of which came right to the state of Maryland to keep people in their homes that were being foreclosed upon by the big banks unfairly at the time. And so, because I believe in being able to stay in your home and having home ownership. So you take that and you translate that forward to your question, how are we going to make home ownership affordable, make sure people can stay in their homes? You hit on a really great point at the end. People are just getting squeezed on taxes. We just can't keep taxing people. And that's always sort of the go-to thing that a lot of Democrats will do is like, oh, we need more money. Let's just tax people more. And people can't afford a $500 unexpected expense right now. They certainly don't need their taxes to go up. That said, we're going to legalize cannabis and tax that. And so that's, that's a whole new thing, and it goes into criminal justice issues as well, as you know. But so taxing that and taxing online gambling and some of the new things to help pay for other stuff. But in terms of affordability, the way you're able to buy, first of all, Frederick is unbelievable. And I go to Frederick. I'm there once a week. I'm meeting with people. I'll be there tomorrow. I'm there pretty much once a week to meet with somebody, to go to the restaurants, to go to the coffee places, to talk to folks about what we can do. Because in Frederick, for example, when I'm governor, we're going to get the conference center. That's just going to happen. That's a deliverable that's going to happen. It should have happened before. Right now, it's not happening because of silly politics, but that's going to happen. But talking about affordability, as Frederick continues to grow and get to be a place that's more attractive to folks, which is a good thing, and it's going to be more so once we get some mass transit down 270, so people can commute into DC and into sort of edge cities, if you will, of Bethesda and Rockville and so forth. It's going to get more expensive. And so we have to be able to have jobs. And as we rebuild Maryland in the wake of COVID, we need to do so through different lenses. Because guess what? Some people, it turns out people didn't realize there were economic disparities between people of color and everybody else. It's been going on for about 400 years. Some people just figure it out. Well, that's the good news on that is now everybody will be part of that team as we rebuild the economy after COVID, to do so with inclusion, to do so with diversity, to bridge the inequalities that we have, but to make sure people have jobs and we have job training, that we make sure the community colleges are vibrant and having vocational training and tech training for the jobs of today. Because if you have a job, you're making money and you can buy the more expensive house. So that's sort of part of the program.
And I agree with that. I think that's a great idea. I know a lot of the people in Frederick do not live in Frederick. They live in Frederick but don't work in Frederick. I mean, I myself personally has even been like, okay, if there's a way I could work in Frederick, I would, right? But then I look at the income, I'm like, I can't do that. So it's just like, let me go ahead and just stay where I'm at, because Frederick just can't match what I make or even more. So that is definitely a topic that a lot of my concern in Frederick is that we have a lot of people living in Frederick but do not work in Frederick. So that means that their money's not going back into Frederick, and so it worries me of how we would fix that and what we can do to fix that.
Well, the tax money is going back in. I mean, not the day-to-day sort of what you spend while you're at work, but it's a fair point. I mean, one of the things when I became state's attorney in Montgomery County, they said, well, why don't you have a residency requirement? Require everybody that works in the office to live in Montgomery County. And my staff, the staff people for sure, the lawyers, some could, some couldn't, but the staff people sure couldn't. And so they all moved to Frederick, because Frederick was less expensive. And I became state attorney in 1998 until 2006. I served 2 terms there, and now Frederick's booming, and that's a great thing. And the diversity there is great, and the sort of the diversity of things to do is great, and it's a wonderful place. But you can't price everybody out, and so we need to bring more jobs there. I do think the conference center will help significantly in terms of building the jobs to build it, but also once the conference center is there, it'll be the focal point for Central Maryland for tourism to come in, and that's what Frederick really needs. So, I think it's a good thing for the most part, that housing prices have gone up in Frederick means it's a more attractive place that people want to be. But on the other hand, we also have to be very, very cognizant that we have affordable housing, and that affordable housing is available to folks that we don't want to push out of the city, and that can live there and stay there. And there's a lot of other stuff around that, like first responders.
So
go ahead.
So you talked about COVID a little bit, and we know that they have another virus coming out, and so they're still looking at that
variant of the same virus.
Yeah, the variant of the same virus, right? So, and a lot of people are struggling financially. I mean, we know that a lot of renters, they still have money coming out there somewhere, but the homeowners are still like, okay, what can we do? They can't get that assistance. I've heard a lot of homeowners say, we don't get assistance. We just have to, muscle it out or figure out ways to pay the bills. And how would you as a governor, I know it's going to continue to still fixing what has happened during COVID is not going to be fixed overnight. There's things the funds still have to be moving to make sure that everybody can sustain themselves. Do you have a plan on if you did win as governor when it comes to that?
Well, I actually think it's going to get worse. I mean, what's happened, we saw the job reports, and you hear the job reports all through COVID, how many millions of people became unemployed. Women, for example, almost half the women, 47% of the women in the United States lost their jobs or had to change jobs during COVID. And so much of that, by the way, is predicated on childcare issues. So we need to have childcare. We need to address the childcare issue for all families, not just women, but for all families. And we need to give incentives to businesses to provide childcare at the businesses, as well as government subsidies for childcare more generally and broadly. Because I think what's going to happen is we've had this sort of Band-Aid where the federal government has been doing these PPPs and giving people money and all that, and that's going to stop. And now, like the merry-go-round just ends, and all of a sudden, oh wait, I'm out of a job. I got all these bills to pay, and the government's not giving me any more money. So how are we going to do that? And so I think there's a short-term and a long-term solution. Short-term is going to be that we need to encourage businesses to open back up. Now they are right now, and one of the reasons why Governor Hogan says he stopped the federal government giving us free money, which is just crazy, because it's hard to find people to work. Well, so there'll be people to work once that stops. So that'll be good because the economy is coming back, and people, COVID is very much in a lot of folks' rearview mirror. The people who are knuckleheads and don't get vaccinations, it's not in their rearview mirror. I just don't. It makes zero sense to me why someone would not get vaccination, and hopefully they will. But for the most part, it's in people's rearview mirror, so they'll go back to work, and the economy will start to pick up. In the meantime, we have to get pre-K for families, because without an education, we're going to continue this divide, this learning divide, because every study has shown people of lower socioeconomic status, when they get to kindergarten, are already behind. So education is going to be a piece of it. We also have to go, and what we found during COVID was something that was a huge problem, was the last mile of broadband, where some people can't work from home. There is going to be a new dynamic in terms of the workplace. You and I are talking over on a computer screen, and that's going to be a bigger and part of the future of the workforce. So, but you have to have broadband to do that, and if you don't, you're isolated, and your children need to be able to go to school and be able to have access to the internet as well. So that's part of the sort of the rebuild that we're talking about in the wake of COVID. But we have to attract businesses, and we have to get retail, we have to get industry and manufacturing to come back to Maryland with a focus on labor and working families. One of the reasons why the Democrats lost 75, just think about the last election, 75 million Americans walked into the voting booth or mailed in their ballot for a person who was this president who was mentally ill, narcissistic, egomaniac, dictator wannabe, 75 million people voted for him, and the Republicans swept across the board practically through the United States after the guy that basically murdered millions, well, hundreds of thousands of Americans because of his voting. And why is that? There's a lot of reasons why that is, but one of the big reasons is the Democrats didn't have a message to working families. How are we going to answer the question you just asked about jobs, getting food on people's table, getting good education for their kids, getting affordable housing, access to opportunity, not handouts, but providing access for folks, and providing access for folks to help themselves and have the same, so everybody has the same opportunity to achieve. And I think that's the mentality we need to have going forward, and that's what we'll do when I'm governor, as opposed to a Republican governor that is happy to take care of folks that already have it, but not happy to give a hand down to the people that don't have it.
Yeah, and I thank you for that. I know we have talked about education. I mean, we think about the education and what's going on in a lot of areas. Baltimore City, for example, with the ACs not being in the schools. I mean, there are so many things that I think could be improved. The diversity in our curriculum, topics like that. And how do you feel about those things?
So the air conditioning issue to me is like putting makeup on in the morning. That's a problem, but it's a little bit of a problem. The big problem, I started a lacrosse league, an inner-city lacrosse league about 12 years ago called Charm City Lacrosse in Baltimore, because that's Maryland's the epicenter of lacrosse, and the kids in Baltimore didn't have it and everyone else did. So I started this league. We have 500-600 kids in it. We're able to get kids into some of the great private schools or go off to great colleges through the vehicle of lacrosse. I bring that up because on Saturday mornings, I would actually go every Saturday morning. And I would go there and I'd see these beautiful kids from underserved communities, almost exclusively kids of color. Coach Doug, what's going on? You know, they're 5, 6, 7 years old, looking in the eye, smart, beautiful, wonderful, happy kids. That's Saturday morning. Monday morning, they're going off to some school where most of them won't graduate. They're lucky if they don't get killed along the way from high school. And the ones that do graduate from high school, most of them can't read at a competent level to go on to college. And then we sit around wondering why they're selling drugs or shooting each other or joining gangs or what have you. And so education is critical. And you brought up an important point. I'm working with the teachers union. I've talked to the teachers unions throughout the state, and they want the same things. And they want to be able to teach kids, and they want to have, and we ought to be able to pay our teachers more because we trust them to our children and we give them almost no money. But you brought up a good point at the end of things, like what are we teaching them? And we ought to have things like financial literacy in our schools. So people, when they grow up, they know what a mortgage is and how to balance their bank books and how to do all that. But we also ought to realize that not everyone wants to go, to an Ivy League college or can go to an Ivy League college. Some people want to be an HVAC guy or plumber woman or, get into vocational training. And we ought to be able to do that and teach these kids at an earlier age so they can get a certification and get a job that's sitting there waiting for them. And while I'm on that topic, folks that are in jail and coming back at it, we incarcerate just ridiculously way too many Americans for the dumbest reasons. And but the reality is there's a huge swath of our population in jail, and as they come out of jail, they ought to be able to be ready, workforce ready. And so I talked about this when I ran for governor last time. The Baltimore Sun did an article really making fun of me for doing it. And of course, now they are doing it, which is to give prisoners, as within a couple of years of coming out, an iPad like I'm talking to you on, not for pornography or illicit purposes, but to be able to get training, to get a degree in auto mechanics, in culinary arts. So when they come out, they can go get a job. The company that hires them gets a tax break, and now we have a productive member of society that's going to be a contributing taxpayer and father or mother and to their children. And there's education has a lot of different faces in a lot of different ways, and we really need to focus on it because we've got a great education system in Maryland, but it can be a whole lot better.
And I agree with that. Thank you for that. You know, in Baltimore, I work with individuals that's coming out of prison and getting them back into society. And I've been in the reentry field for 7 years. So I'm very familiar with how it's really important that we make sure that they have the tools that they need when they are released back in society, because we all know what happens if they don't have the tools, right? I mean, I can tell a young man to go apply for a job, but he doesn't have a computer to apply for a job. How is he going to apply for a job? If he wants to go and get, like you said, education, if he doesn't have a computer, how is he going to get education? So what is he going to do? They're going to get discouraged. They're going to go back on the block. It's kind of like a whole like vicious cycle. So we have to, prison like reform is one of the biggest topics that I'm very passionate about, and making sure that we give these men and women the right tool that they have when they are released from incarceration. And so I thank you for that, touching on that topic, and I definitely support you in that topic when it comes to that. So if you were to win, what would be your action plan for the first 60 days in office?
Well, there's a lot of things you can do when you come in after a Republican administration. It's not like Vince Lombardi. It's really trying to start to change the culture and the mentality of how we run our government. I mean, I'm the only one in the field that's running for government on either side that has held a statewide office, run it incredibly effectively with enormous success stories behind it, and with a progressive but practical perspective. So, marriage equality was one of the things that I led on. I wrote an opinion recognizing out-of-state same-sex marriage in 2010. The right-wing Republicans literally started impeachment proceedings against me. And I use that as an example because, when I started the first civil rights department in Maryland's history when I was Attorney General, and I ran Barack Obama's campaign with Elijah Cummings when everyone else was against us. And you have to do these things because you have to think differently. You have to get the state to think differently. How are we going to think boldly? Mm-hmm. And the answer, this is the way we've always done that, should never be the answer to any problem. So a couple of things I would do right away. I would get Baltimore would be an area that we're all paying for because our taxes are going to the mm-hmm. issues that are there. I would have, so once a month, pick the area, affordable housing, education, jobs, criminal justice, and get the stakeholders from Baltimore, but also national stakeholders from places where things are working more smoothly. Mm-hmm. Put them in a room, say everything's on the table. What are we going to do to fix this problem? And I'll mm-hmm. be sitting in the room with them and get this elected officials in Baltimore, for example, to do the same. Mm-hmm. I literally, I know it's self-serving because I'm talking about Frederick, but get the conference center up and running. Get whatever mm-hmm. needs to get done there, get that done, including underground parking. So there's parking in downtown Frederick, and get the hotel up and get a conference center there. I would help get the process rolling for converting the 2 billion pounds of chicken manure that goes in the Chesapeake Bay. I'm an environmentalist. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. 2 billion pounds of chicken manure that goes in the Chesapeake Bay every year. Have a power plant on the Eastern Shore to convert that chicken manure into energy so that we can start cleaning up our bay, have an alternative source of energy so we can get to 0% carbon in Maryland and really effectuate climate change here in Maryland, including I talked to the car manufacturers and Tesla and get the make sure we have 3-tier chargers for electric vehicles so we can get them not only just in gas stations, but in shopping centers and near restaurants and community areas so people can recharge their cars and people will get electric vehicles to match what the car manufacturers are doing anyway, going toward electric vehicles. So those are some of the first things that I would do. I would, a little pet project, I want to get the Final Four in Lacrosse to come to Baltimore every year, like they have Omaha for the World Series of baseball. And that's, brings tourism, brings money into the city and, sort of puts a light and shines on the great things that we have in Baltimore. And then start looking at mass transit down 270 from Frederick mm-hmm. to the, like I said, the edge cities, but also into DC. And in Baltimore, you look at the red line, make sure the purple line is actually moving along and getting that going. So there's a lot that we need to do. And then, of course, hire the best and the brightest folks to help run government and make them look like our state and and I think that's important as well in terms of diversity. And that's what I've done when I was state's attorney. That's what I did as attorney general. That's what I'll do when I'm governor.
And I love the idea about the lacrosse. My son played lacrosse ever since he was 8. He still plays lacrosse. And so he's on the club team right now, and he's definitely would love to go and play on a college level. So we will be going to a tournament next week in Leesburg, actually. He plays for Team Maryland. Shout out Team Maryland.
And we have the coolest flag. I hope they put the flag on the.
They did. So he enjoys
with other states.
Yeah, he enjoys the sport. So and it's a great program. So your platform, before you go, we definitely want to talk about your platform and tell us a little bit about your platform and why we should vote for you.
Well, we touched on a lot of the issues and a lot of the sort of components of the platform. I think broadly speaking, as we come out of COVID and the economy struggles and we rebuild the economy in Maryland, we can do it one of two ways. We either have a Republican doing it or a Democrat doing it. And I would argue, and the numbers would show it, that I'm by far the most likely Democrat in the field to be able to beat the Republican. And so we actually need to win. And so we may have differences on the margins, but we're all Democrats for the most part that are running for governor as Democrats. And so we need to, as we rebuild, we need to do so through lenses of inclusion, diversity, and equity, and make sure we have that. We need to make sure we reach out to the folks that need the help of government to provide that access to opportunity that I was talking about earlier around education, around criminal justice reform, around the environment, around housing and healthcare and public health. And we have to, healthcare is a right, and we need to not just say it, we may make sure we do it. So everybody has access to healthcare in Maryland. So I'm excited about it. It's a great place to live. I grew up here. I'm running against some folks that are from New York and all kinds of other places. But and we need experience. I mean, the biggest reason why I would submit somebody should vote for me over somebody else is that I have the experience of getting things done. And we have a bold vision. And the reason why I know I can get things done is because I've done it before. A lot of the folks I'm running against truly believe that raising money for a nonprofit, it qualifies them to be governor of Maryland. Even though they've never run for anything, never been dog catcher in Maryland, they feel that that's a prerequisite. It's no time to experiment, and we need experience, and we need somebody who's gotten things done. So I'm excited about it. Voters around the state are really gravitating toward us. People, as I said, people in Frederick, I walk down the streets and people are like, yeah, I'm excited about the campaign, and it's inspirational, and we have a long road to go, but really excited about it.
And I think I agree with that. I think Maryland definitely needs a person that can get things done. I have to say, we've had Hogan for far too long. And it's time for a change, and we do need a Democrat governor. So it's really important that us as voters, get out and vote. I mean, Frederick has a very low voting turnout rate, and I know as myself on the campaign trail, that's something that I'm looking forward to, is making sure that we get a lot of people to register to vote and actually get out and vote, because we have to get those people out to vote.
Yeah, and Jan Gardner has done a phenomenal job, in my opinion, as the county executive there. Her term is coming up, so Frederick will have a county executive race. There's some great candidates vying for it.
Right. Yeah.
And so Frederick hopefully will have a little bit of a higher turnout. But in the general election, we need to really inspire and get people out there. And one of the things that's helping Democrats, where I go to the Eastern Shore, I'll be in the Eastern Shore in this weekend. I'll be in Western Maryland this weekend. I'll be in Frederick this weekend. Those places need to have a Democrat at the top of the ticket of the governor's race that they're not running away from, that they can embrace and say, we believe in their values. They're progressive, but they're practical and pragmatic. And that's what we really need to make sure that we can bring the whole ticket up and we get Democrats in office and keep them in office through Frederick and also the rest of Western Maryland, frankly.
And where will you be in Frederick this weekend?
Frederick Coffee House is one spot. And, I'm actually having a meeting at the Roy Rogers. So, different spots, but I'll be around downtown. I usually go downtown.
And what time would you be at Frederick Coffee House?
Well, I don't know yet. I haven't.
Okay. Okay.
So
Well, I definitely. I hope I see you.
We've met there. So
yeah, I hope I see you down this weekend. I will be in Frederick this weekend, so
Great.
I will be downtown this weekend. It's first Saturday, and so I always love first Saturday.
That's
so
right.
Hopefully that I will get to see you, Doug. I am so happy you came on my show today, and I wish you all the luck. I know you're one of the people that I got to sit with and talk with, and I was so inspired, and you definitely gave me some great pointers, and I appreciate that of all the mentorship that you did give me that day.
Well, thank you, and thank you for putting yourself out there. You know, a lot of people, especially in this world with social media and all the people out there that just criticize and criticize and criticize. It's tough to run, and that's why we end up with a lot of the politicians that we get. And people put themselves out there, work hard for the job. That's a great thing. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for having me on the show.
Really I wish you all the luck and good luck.
Happy 4th of July.
Happy 4th of July.
Still the greatest country in the world, but we need to keep fixing it.
We do.
Yes, we do.
We do. Thank you so much. You have a great night.
You too. Bye-bye.